Tendulkar had just captured the imagination of everybody by then. That 100 he got in Perth at the end of that 92 tour, there's a veteran English writer called John Woodcock who covered 200 test matches. John Woodcock. He said, we are calling him the best young batter in the world. If he wasn't young, wouldn't we call him the best batsman in the world?
India lift the World Cup after 28 years. The party starts in the dressing room.
Hello and welcome back to Kutti Stories with Ash, brought to you by BKT Tires. Where did we leave? 87?
87.
India, the powerhouse of world cricket, so expectantly. The Indian fans are loving their cricketers. I'm going to ask you something on that, whether Indian fans love Indian cricketers more or Indian cricket itself more. So that's a separate topic. But there's a lot of expectation that this Kapil's era is left, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's very difficult to carry forward a legacy. It looked like Indian cricket is on the right tracks. Australia win a World Cup. Does India actually hold on to the expectations, Harsha? What was this era? We're going to cover 3 World Cups.
But
92,
between 87 and 92 is a period of great turmoil in our cricket. Kapil Dev is removed as captain in 87. Dilip Vengsarkar becomes captain immediately after the 87 World Cup. India, in those days, if you didn't win, you were sacked. So India lost the semi-final of the World Cup immediately after the series against the West Indies. And Dilip Vengsarkar is captain of that. Coming back from the tour of West Indies again in 89, India's players stop over and go to the US, unscheduled visit. So the board sacks six players.
Because they went on a tour?
Because they had some private matches they had organized in the US. So Vengsarkar is sacked as captain. Who becomes captain? Krishnamachari Srikanth. He takes the team to Pakistan. He comes back, he's not scored a run. There's a little power struggle going on. Indian players want logos on their shirts for the first time.
They want logos?
Logos on
like
the
shirt? Personal sponsorships?
No, the team sponsor. So Jimmy Amarnath organizes team sponsorships and the board suddenly starts to think the players are getting too powerful.
So now the players are bringing in sponsors. It's not the administrators.
Not yet. The players are bringing in sponsors. So Jimmy Amarnath says, I'll organize the sponsorship. So then Amarnath gets dropped because he's trying to become too powerful. And there's player power that is starting to grow. So Srikanth
like a players association.
Srikanth is sacrificed as captain. Azharuddin becomes captain all of a sudden. India go to England and go to New Zealand, Australia with Azharuddin, this at that time, very genial, understated, almost afraid of the seniors kind of person. Under him, who's playing? Kapil Dev, Vengsarkar, Shastri, Srikanth, the 4 India captains playing under him. With this turmoil, India went into the 1992 World Cup.
Interesting. So the Kapil's era brings about a lot of hope. Now Indian cricket fans want a semi-final in the minimum, right? They at the very least. And nowadays it's not even the semi-final. You want the ICC silverware now. So Venkat Raghavan, Kapil Dev, Azharuddin. What do you remember from the Azharuddin era? There's 3 World Cups.
Venkat Raghavan in that era to hold his own as an off-spinner. There's something about people in Chennai, tall engineers who bowl off-spin in Chennai.
They also bowl undercutters.
And Venkat Raghavan bowled a very good leg cutter also, as his other one to the off spinner. All off spinners in those days had the leg cutter as their faster one. As a personality, Kapil Dev flamboyant as a personality. What was Azharuddin?
Magnanimous?
Azharuddin was a child of destiny. When I wrote his biography, I actually wanted to call it a child of destiny. And then I thought it might be unfair to him because it was not only destiny that did...
Why do you say it's destiny?
At various moments in his career, destiny has played a major part. He was deeply religious. We could do a 2-hour program only on all that is happening around Azharuddin, but not a dominant personality.
Really?
I mean, I remember at one point, I was ghosting columns for all the 3 captains in Australia in 91-92. Therefore, I had to do Azharuddin, and one column was late.
Okay, just to hold you there.
Yeah.
Talk to me about ghosting columns. It's not a trend now, is it?
No, because we have people hosting their own shows. But I would talk to Alan Border and write it for him. I would talk to Richie Richardson, write it for him. I had to talk to Azharuddin. And one day the column got late, and in front of everybody he apologized to Kapil Dev and said, because Kapil Dev's company was syndicating the column that Azharuddin was writing. Okay. Their features.
So Kapil Dev had a company?
Yes, and Gavaskar had a company called Professional Management Group. They were rivals in syndicating columns. But Azharuddin looks to Kapil Dev and said, sorry Paji, dobara ye galti kabhi nahi hoegi. This mistake will not happen again. He's the captain of the Indian team. And he's telling Kapil Dev, whose company is paying him to write columns, sorry, this will not happen again, my mistake. And one day, Kapil calls me inside the Indian dressing room and he says, Aaj Azhar ka column main bolunga. Azhar is too mild. I will do the column for Azharuddin. Today we need to speak strongly. And Azhar says, it's okay. So Kapil Dev was this huge personality. Vengsarkar was this huge personality. And Azharuddin is captain of all of them. And that was the team that went into the 92 World Cup. Srikanth, personality of his own, also coming towards the end of his career. Now look, Kapil Dev is coming to the end of his career. Srikanth is coming to the end of his career. Ravi Shastri has come to the end of his career. His knee was hurting him. Srinath is just starting. Tendulkar's first World Cup. Sanjay Manjrekar's first World Cup. Jadeja, first time for India. Kambli, first time. So there was a combination of seniors going out and these youngsters coming and playing for the first time.
I do not know whether I should call this the era of Azharuddin or Sachin Tendulkar. Sachin Tendulkar, one of the greatest icon and the poster boy. In fact, you can call him the Bharat Ka icon. Just like our sponsors BKT Tires, they are Bharat Ka tires. And anyway, Sachin in this era had everything going for him. He bowled seam up, batted like $1 million, but didn't captain the Indian cricket team as much as Azharuddin did. So is it fair to call it as the Azharuddin era or Sachin era?
It's a very interesting question because if you want to call it an era named after a captain, then you say, yes, this was the Azharuddin era. But don't forget, between 96 and 99, Tendulkar was captain of India. Then Azhar became captain again in 99.
His captaincy turmoil is just gone.
We've been very lucky since 2001. We've had a lot of stability. Ganguly, perfect captain for the times. We always called Ganguly the wartime general. When India stabilized, we had a fabulous peacetime manager. Rahul Dravid was a fantastic captain for those 2 years. Anil Kumble in between, very powerful personality. MS Dhoni, Virat Kohli, we had great stability in leadership. And that contributed to the growth of Indian cricket. But between 92 and 99, there's the same turmoil again. You tend to refer to a team as captain's team, but Tendulkar had just captured the imagination of everybody by then. That 100 he got in Perth at the end of that 92 tour, there's a veteran English writer called John Woodcock who covered 200 test matches. John Woodcock. He said, we are calling him the best young batter in the world. If he wasn't young, wouldn't we call him the best batsman in the world? And we're talking only 92. When Merv Hughes told Alan Border, he says, this little so-and-so is going to break all your records.
It was actually the first time I remember watching on TV that a test match in Australia, where an Indian batter was plonking his foot on the front foot and driving McDermott down the ground.
Bottom-handed. And doing it bottom-handed. It was incredible what he was doing in Australia.
You dropped it a wee bit short and it was going in front of square. I remember watching cricket a lot those days. Largely batsmen, when they punched off the back foot, it used to skew off to the gullies, Yes. Go to third man for boundary. But that was probably the first time. I was all but 6 or 7 Harsha at that time.
And but you still notice he was hitting in front of square on the offside?
He was. Because I used to play tennis ball cricket at home and my granddad and dad used to watch from the balcony and they used to say, hit it in front of square. Hit it down the ground, That's a sort of cricketing culture.
So I'll tell you, one of my big passions in life was fielding at backward point at the university team that I played for. Our bowler was quick. And so inevitably my movement would be to the left.
Correct.
And that is when you appreciate what Tendulkar was doing because he's 5'5". He's standing up to Craig McDermott, Merv Hughes, Mike Whitney. These kind of bowlers were quick and hitting in front of square of the back foot. And that boundary in Perth at the old Wacker, I often said you needed an auto rickshaw to get the ball back.
What about Adelaide?
The straight boundary in Adelaide and the square boundary in Perth. And Tendulkar was hitting at 4-5 and over. What had happened was Tendulkar has now captured everybody's imagination from that series in Pakistan. And between 1991, India hardly played any cricket. But he went and got his first 100 in England. So even though it is Azharuddin's team, it has already become
Tendulkar's era. That's the memory that you talked about. We'll dive into superstars now. One of the greatest comebacks ever, which is Imran Khan's, right? A global superstar at this point of time. Came back from retirement?
Yeah, as I always tell people, I don't understand enough politics to know whether Imran Khan was a great prime minister. But people of my era, we look up to Imran Khan and Mark Taylor as the two greatest captains that we have seen of that era. Look what Imran does in 92. By 92, Waqar Younis has missed the World Cup because of injury. But he's got Aqib Javed, he's got Wasim Akram at his peak. Imran is bowling mid-120s by now. His body is given up. He's bowling mid-120s. But he's a proud leader. Where does he bat in the 92 World Cup?
That's up the order.
Bats number 3. Imran Khan in the second half of his career has a test average of 50.
Wow.
So he bats at number 3 and takes this team along. A team is gone virtually. He literally picks up this team and brings them to the final. I mean, I remember Wasim Akram once getting a call from Imran when I was with him long after he had retired, long after Wasim has retired. And literally, skipper, he's like that after the legend has retired. That is the aura that he had on that side. And the revival of Inzamam, the story goes that Inzamam has done nothing in the World Cup. And he says to Imran in Auckland, I'm not done, I don't want to play. He said, if I didn't want you to play, I would have left you in Multan. I've brought you here to play. Then the revival starts against New Zealand. They beat New Zealand again in the semi-final, come to the final. Wasim bowls those 2 balls that make the difference.
Oh my God. I can actually do an entire episode on just those couple of deliveries that Wasim Akram bowled. What a phenomenal bowler. Was Wasim Akram a superstar yet? Or do we have to rank somebody? You spoke about Mark Taylor. I think we need to get back to Mark Taylor. 2 contrasting personalities, Imran Khan and Mark Taylor.
Very, very different. Venkatraghavan once told me when he became umpire that if ever he thought the game was going a little out of control with the sledging or whatever, he would just tell Mark Taylor and Taylor would say, thanks, my job. I'll look after my team. And he said there was never a problem after that. Great gentleman, loved the game, fabulous captain, and really took the Australian team to the next level after Alan Border produced a revival. Mark Taylor took it to the next level. But in 92, it was a very tired Australian team that had played a whole season. They'd played 10 or 12 one-day internationals. They'd played 5 test matches. And then they went to New Zealand to play the first game of their World Cup. So Australia were very, very insipid at that 92 World Cup. They didn't turn up. But India didn't turn up either.
We need to talk about a few superstars here because it's 92, 96, 99. A lot of cricket changed here. The landscape and the way the game was played changed altogether. In 92, Martin Crowe, the late Martin Crowe is probably phenomenal player. Then we need to talk about Sanath Jayasuriya, what Sri Lanka did in 96. You can't look past Lance Klusener, the power hitter. Power hitting wasn't a concept then.
No.
And New Zealand brought in Mark Greatbatch to take over the first 15 overs in 92.
And opened with an off spinner.
Deepak Patel, exactly.
Opened with an off spinner. Do we know anyone on this program? Do we know of an off spinner who takes wickets with a new ball? Who's taken most wickets for India with a new ball in Test match cricket? He's on this program.
What is it with off spinners and the new ball?
There you go.
Do you know a thing?
Because they like to drift it away. They do things with the new ball, whatever.
Was Deepak Patel an engineer?
No. But Deepak Patel had migrated there.
Okay.
And Martin Crowe thought that was a great way to start. I still think the Greatbatch innovation of charging out and hitting bowlers, it was tailored to the grounds in New Zealand at the time.
Eden Park.
Yes. But it was a greater innovation than Deepak Patel bowling with the new ball. But in India was the most disappointing team at
92, in the 92 World Cup.
Finished 7 out of 9. The big story there was South Africa coming back.
Yeah.
And making the semi-final of their first World Cup. I was on a flight from Perth to Sydney. India played their first game against England at Perth. South Africa made their debut in the World Cup against Australia in Sydney. I didn't know that the flight that we were going on from Perth to Sydney was Johannesburg, Perth, Sydney. And the flight was chock-a-block with middle-aged to elderly men behaving like little children, looking at each other's ticket numbers with a map of the Sydney cricket ground, saying, where will we be when South Africa play their first ball in international cricket? Wow. And I discovered, you talked about your father, I saw people like that excited because South Africa is back in world cricket. First ball, Alan Donald bowls to Jeff Marsh, big outside edge, and Brian Aldridge says not out.
South Africa's, like we speak about Indian cricket, right? We have 2 World Cups, 250 over World Cups in the kitty. South Africa, probably the most talented, deadly, non-World Cup winning side.
Most intense.
Intense, yeah.
I don't know whether the intensity contributes to losing because
pressure.
There's so much pressure. By the way, 92 the image of the 92 World Cup was Jonty Rhodes running out.
Oh, Inzamam
was running out Inzamam. So South Africa provided a lot of moments in 92. It also provided the worst rain rule ever. This is a Richie Beno Rain rule
Okay.
about taking out, because the side batting second had everything in their favor. So you said, we will take out the three...
So DL wasn't there?
Not yet.
Okay.
The three lowest scoring consecutive overs will go away from the side that has batted first. Every team lost
One
out.
ball, 22 to win, right?
Every team lost out as a result of that. Rain helped Pakistan come back. Pakistan was out of the World Cup when Rain washed out their game against either Zim or England, one of them. That is how they came back. Rain brought Pakistan back in that World Cup, and then they were unstoppable.
We spoke about South Africa. We cannot miss a superstar from this particular 3 World Cup stint. It's Lance Klusener. Never before had world cricket had seen such a powerful lower middle order hitter who could bowl 140.
Yes.
Have you ever seen one? What was it like watching Lance Klusener? He tonked one with Shoaib Akhtar.
Absolutely. A whole era of fast bowling all-rounders we first started seeing. Sean Pollock, Lance Klusener, Brian McMillan, all of them coming through. We'll talk about Klusener, but a star had arrived at the 92 World Cup called Brian Lara.
How can we miss him?
Brian Lara arrived at the 92 World Cup. Now in 96, if you look at the cards, South Africa playing their league games in Pakistan, they have decimated every team, won all 5 games, set up a quarter-final, because in those days, you had 4 teams qualifying and you played a quarter-final.
And then
South Africa play a quarter-final against the West Indies, who lost to Kenya. But Brian Lara scored 180 odd balls.
What a team of Kenyans that was. Kenyans. Maurice Odumbe, Steve Tikolo, everybody bounced on.
2-3 Odumbes, 2-3 Tikolos,
Yes.
2-3 Sujis. In 92, heartbreak. 96, the best team of the 96 World Cup, a Lara century decimates them. 99, they have not yet recovered from 99. So 92 to 99 is the story of South African heartbreak. That game, actually, the catch that Herschel Gibbs drops of Steve Waugh, it's rumored that Steve Waugh told him
Apparently he
dropped the World Cup. He didn't. But I saw Steve Waugh playing slog sweeps for the first time in 99 in a rain-affected game. Because Steve Waugh hit that 100, Australia qualified to play South Africa in the semi-final. And then, are you a Shane Warne fan?
I'm a big Shane Warne fan. The spell that he bowls in that game to get those wickets. Gary Kirsten, Jack Carlos, Herschel Gibbs, bang, bang, bang.
In spite of that, Klusener should have won that game.
But you know what I remember? For the first time in international cricket, there was a ball that was hit to the left of extra cover, and Mark Watt, long off, just turned. The ball hit the boundary boards and came right back to extra cover.
That was how hard
Klusener hit the ball. I was playing cricket. I played under 14 state for Tamil Nadu. I could drive a ball. I was a good driver of the cricket ball. I couldn't fathom somebody hitting a cover drive that hard with all the 3 stumps exposed. And my God, what a heartbreak. I remember going to school the next day. India didn't qualify. I never saw underwhelming World Cup, a big Indian cricket fan. I scored every single game of that particular World Cup.
The 99 World Cup?
The 99 World Cup, starting with Alan Mullally bowling up. I remember those names. And what struck me was I went back to school and there was some contest. My wife and we were classmates at that point of time.
She was not your wife then?
She was not. No.
Yeah.
I aspired her to be my wife at that point. I went to school and the teacher gave us some poem competition or something. Write a poem down. I remember writing a 3-page poem on how Alan Donald was the worst cricketer I've ever seen. I couldn't understand.
Alan Donald is a very interesting player. You give him the ball and they call him White Lightning. Always with the bat in hand, something happened when Alan Donald was batting. Now, if you notice the Alan Donald run out in that Klusener game, see what happens the previous ball.
He runs.
The previous ball, there is a direct hit at the non-striker's end. Alan Donald runs and should have been run out at the non-striker's end and he misses.
They miss, yeah.
So now he doesn't run, but the throw from underarm return from Mark Waugh was the first one.
Yeah.
The Mark Waugh underarm return
reverse flip
could have hit the non-striker's end and just rolls over to the other end, and they're sitting and watching. In the commentary, every time Klusener hits the boundary, Mike Proctor would turn to Bill Lawry and say, "Take that." When a wicket falls, Bill Lawry turns to Mike Proctor and says, "Take that."
Sledging of the highest order.
As soon as the game is over, I now have to do a post-game show for Star Sports. So I'm quickly running to the washroom. Who's standing next to me in the washroom? Guys can tell stories about what happens in male washrooms. Mike Proctor. And I have not seen a man's face like that in my life.
Red in anger.
Red and anger because South Africa have just gone out. But to me, in many ways, from India's point of view, there was one game that to me encapsulated it all was the game against Zimbabwe. We were along the boundary line hosting. So India 50 for 3 and have come to 150 for 3. And everybody's favorite player in those days was Sadgop and Ramesh. Because Ramesh and Lakshman were the two people, when they timed the ball, you thought someone was playing the sitar. He timed the ball beautifully.
Like caressing the ball.
Me and R. Mohan are standing by the boundary. Can you imagine? No security, whatever.
R. Mohan, by the way, is one of the most senior editors
of the
Hindu.
That time of the Hindu, then later. And I told R. Mohan, as soon as Ramesh got his 50, I said, I think he is suddenly playing too many shots, almost like he's relaxed. I have a fear he's going to get out. So Mohan screams from the boundary in Tamil to Sadgop and Ramesh, saying, stay there, don't get out. You have to stay there till the end, because I don't know how to call out in Tamil. So R. Mohan...
You should have tried Telugu.
Because he probably speaks it, I don't know.
He did,
speaks all languages. And guess what? 2 balls later, boom, boom, Ramesh
Gone.
gets out for 55.
But Harsha, what a team that Zimbabwe squad was. Murray
Best,
Goodwin, the Flower Brothers, Alistair
Johnson.
Campbell, Neil Johnson. Oh my God, what a sight.
And
Henry
Henry
Olanga.
Olanga, who
He got a
turned
hat-trick
that
in that
match
game,
around.
did he?
What happened in that game? Ek to India collapsed. Tendulkar didn't play that game.
Yeah, he went back for his father's
The
demise.
morning, we're in the same hotel. I come down and at breakfast, everyone's glum. The Indian team is all glum, saying Tendulkar's lost his father. And I could do 3 hours on Tendulkar. I know the relationship that between Tendulkar and his father. And he would have been shattered, absolutely. He doesn't want to come back. And Anjali and the family say, the only way you can recover from the loss of your father is to be with the sport that you love. So literally, he was forced back to the World Cup and he comes to the game against Kenya.
Makes 140.
He's wearing goggles. I've never seen anyone wear dark glasses like that because they cover the side.
The black glasses.
The black glasses, they
the French
cover the
beard.
side. They cover the side so you can't see any part of his eyes. And I walked up to him and told him in Marathi, you've come back, it's a big story. Can you talk to the media for a while? And he's just taken his pads off from practice. He takes off his glasses and his eyes were swollen and red. He's playing the next day. His eyes are swollen and red. But he talks to them. He says, I have to come back to play for India. Rahul Dravid gets 100 next day. Nobody remembers.
Was it that game against Sri Lanka?
Against Kenya.
Kenya, okay.
Rahul Dravid gets 100. Nobody remembers because Tendulkar gets 100. And for the first time, you see the gesture that Tendulkar makes after all his hundreds, which is he does
Looks up,
this,
yeah.
which was the 100 for his father. And Tendulkar doesn't play against Zimbabwe. India lose to Zimbabwe. And then India lost that game to Australia when we put them into bat when we should have batted first.
We spoke about a lot of global superstars because I think this is my den.
Yes, there you go.
No, I've been following cricket properly now. Nevertheless, I think we should talk about the culture of Indian cricket. That's
Yes.
where our next segment is. When we speak about culture, Harsha, Indian cricket was left by the Kapil Dev's era in 87 with a lot of hope for the rest of the 90s. The commercial capital of world cricket, if not Indian cricket. Commercialization happened in this era. Players started getting a lot of sponsorship. Sachin was the poster boy of India. I remember the Ala Re Ala ad on TV where he tongs balls with the, cricket stump. Some exciting memories.
The story behind that ad is it was actually shot with him using a fly flapper, the fly swatter,
Yes.
playing with that. It was shot with that.
Superimposed later on.
No, later he told Prahlad Kakkad, I cannot disrespect the ball by showing that the fly swatter.
Okay.
So they reshot it without the fly swatter. But what has happened between 92 and 96 is the biggest change in India economically. India has 3 weeks of foreign currency left. Our gold is pledged. We are a country on the verge of bankruptcy.
Economic crisis.
We have no option now but to open up our economy. Customs duties are slashed, import duties are slashed, Indian economy opens because there's an IMF loan, IMF force you to do that. What happens? Overseas companies come in to tap the strength of the Indian middle class. And which is the poster boy of that is Pepsi. Suddenly there is nothing official about it. Who becomes the poster boy of Pepsi? Is Tendulkar. Tendulkar becomes the poster boy of liberalization. By 96, Indian cricket is now suddenly everyone's making money out of endorsements. Star Sports, ESPN Star Sports come in. But in 96, in spite of all this money coming in, India is hosting the 96 World Cup. India has to give the ICC whatever money.
This is a shared World Cup. India, Sri Lanka and Pakistan.
Yes,
wasn't it?
but
Yeah.
primarily India. By the way, at the 92 World Cup, the trophy is given by Colin Cowdrey as the head of the ICC. The ICC only had enough money for one person to go to Australia. ICC had no money. So Colin Cowdrey was the only one who came because ICC had no money. It was a bankrupt organization. By 96, now they want television rights. What has changed between 92 and 96 is India now knows that television rights are possible.
Doordarshan, they were airing games for free on Doordarshan before that.
At that point, Doordarshan had started asking BCCI for money to air cricket.
Oh, okay.
But South Africa happened. South Africa came to India in 91, 92 and asked India, how much do you want for the rights? And India said, oh, so we can make money out of this. That is when they realized you can make rights. 93 TWI came in. By 96, they still need money, right? And Mark Mascarenhas says, I will give you $10 million. After the date for submission of bids is over. He says, I'll give you $10 million. He doesn't have any part of the $10 million with him. He leverages something else, puts up the $10 million. That is the rights fee for the 96 World Cup. $10 million. That's it. A dollar then is about 30 bucks. What kind of money are you talking about? Even in 96.
Yes, probably, yeah. 20, 28, 20, 30 bucks.
Nothing.
Is doing
Nothing.
something, yeah.
So the money has come in, but has not yet come into BCCI. So between 92 and 99, Indian cricket grows ridiculously in terms of finances, but on the field, 92 to 99 was a lost decade.
In one sentence, what was the culture of this Tendulkar era in Indian cricket?
One of the players said to me in that era, when we went to South Africa and Australia in those days, we knew we had no chance of winning, so we were under no stress. So India didn't yet have ambition. Tendulkar had the ambition, but India didn't yet have the ambition. And that was also the tail end of the 90s, was a phase when players were looking at each other and not knowing what was happening there, because it was a dark phase in trusting the Indian team. And the late 90s was when trust went out of Indian cricket. So that phase was a dark phase because trust went out. And the reason I look up so much to the era of 2001 to 2005 was a group of fantastic individuals brought trust back. So if you're asking about what was what was happening in India, the fan had lost trust in the period 97, 98, 99.
There is this whole group called the 90s kids, right?
Yes.
They talk about how Sachin Tendulkar was an emotion. What Sachin Tendulkar meant to them. You said he was the poster boy of Indian cricket, wasn't he?
Liberalization in Indian cricket.
For me, he was the hope that I looked upon every day I got up in the morning. When I saw Sachin bat, my stomach used to churn. Because when he got out, I knew India didn't stand a chance at that point of time. Sachin was not just a poster boy, he was not just a hope, but he was everything, not just in cricket. For a young Indian coming up in life, he was everything. Sachin Tendulkar was something else. He was not just a cricketer.
In 96, he played some great innings in that 96 World Cup, especially against Australia. In 99, he's already been captain and he's suffered the heartbreak of that 97 loss to the West Indies. And he went through a phase where he almost didn't want to play cricket. Can you imagine Tendulkar going through a phase not wanting to play cricket? And I only mention this to talk about the mistrust that had enveloped Indian cricket and why post 2000 you suddenly saw something amazing. In this phase between 96 and 99, Tendulkar plays against Australia, some of the greatest innings that you will see. Desert Storm happens in 98. Some little known hundreds get left out. I think he made 7 or 8 hundreds against Australia in that period because there was so much perfection. The defining 100 amongst all those, since you mentioned Tendulkar, was the 155 was a 100 in Chennai in 98.
An underwhelming 90s for a team in terms of result. But as a cricket fan, as a Sachin Tendulkar fan, it was one of the most joyous decades of Indian cricket. But I think things changed. You said about mistrust. Post 2000s, it was the era of the Gangulis, man. India's cricketing tide turned, commercialization hit tenfolds between 2000 to 2010, and later in 2010 onwards, things changed completely, if not 10 times, 100 times more than what it was in the 90s. And that's on the other side in the next episode, where we will see Ganguly's men. Until then, it's a wrap on this episode of Kutti Stories with Ash, brought to you by BKT Tires.
India lift the World Cup after 28 years. The party starts in the dressing room.